March 7, 1941. The North Atlantic, 400 miles southwest of Iceland. The steel hull of U-110 cut through black water beneath a sky pregnant with storm. Inside the submarine's radio room, Funkmeister Georg Högel hunched over his Enigma machine, fingers dancing across the keyboard with practiced precision. 3 rotors clicked and turned with each keystroke, transforming plain German into what he believed was mathematical perfection. The message traveled through billions of possible combinations, emerging as gibberish that only another Enigma machine configured identically could decode. Högel smiled as he tapped out coordinates for a convoy sighting. The British, he knew with absolute certainty, would never read these words. The machine promised it. Mathematics promised it. The Führer himself had promised it. He was wrong. At that very moment, 600 miles to the east, in a sprawling Victorian mansion outside the village of Bletchley, Buckinghamshire, a 28-year-old Cambridge mathematician named Alan Turing studied a strip of paper emerging from a bronze-colored machine that clicked and whirred like a mechanical heartbeat. The paper contained Högel's message, decoded in plain German. Turing read the coordinates, made a notation, and passed the intelligence to Naval Section. Within hours, British destroyers would alter course. The convoy would survive. U-110 would not. And the war that Germany thought it was fighting in absolute secrecy was already being read like yesterday's newspaper. The German faith in Enigma was not misplaced arrogance. It was mathematics. Pure, beautiful, seemingly unassailable mathematics. The machine itself appeared simple enough. A wooden box, roughly the size of a typewriter, containing 3 rotors, a plug board, and a lamp board. But simplicity masked astronomical complexity. Each of the 3 rotors could be selected from a set of 5, positioned in any order, and set to any of 26 starting positions. The plug board allowed 10 pairs of letters to be swapped before and after encryption. The mathematical possibilities exploded into incomprehensible numbers: 158, 962, 55, 217, 826, 360,000 possible configurations, 158 quintillion possible keys. To put this in perspective, if every human being on Earth in 1941 tested one configuration every second, working without rest, it would take over 10,000 years to exhaust the possibilities. German cryptographers knew this. German commanders knew this. Admiral Karl Dönitz, architect of the U-boat campaign that was slowly strangling Britain, knew this. They slept soundly in their confidence, secure in the knowledge that the electromagnetic ghosts of their radio messages danced through the ether in perfect, impenetrable disguise. What they did not know was that their perfect machine had already been betrayed 3 times before the war even began. The first betrayal came in 1932, when Polish military intelligence acquired documents about Enigma from a disillusioned German cipher office worker. The Poles, facing the reality of German rearmament and Hitler's eastward ambitions, assigned their best mathematical minds to the problem. 3 brilliant young mathematicians from Poznan University, Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rojicki, and Henryk Zygalski, approached Enigma not as cipher clerks, but as pure mathematicians. They saw patterns where others saw chaos. Rejewski, working with permutation theory and group theory, achieved what German engineers had declared impossible. He reverse-engineered the internal wiring of the Enigma rotors without ever seeing the machine itself. By 1938, the Poles were reading German military communications with increasing regularity. They built their own Enigma replicas and developed mechanical devices they called bombi to speed the decryption process. But as war approached, the Germans added complexity. They increased the number of available rotors from 3 to 5. They changed keying procedures. The mathematical space expanded again, and Polish resources, limited by the realities of a small nation between 2 hostile giants, reached their breaking point. The second betrayal came in July 1939, just weeks before the invasion of Poland. In a meeting at a secret location outside Warsaw, the Poles made a decision that would alter the course of history. They shared everything with British and French intelligence: their methods, their bombing machines, their Enigma replicas, their years of mathematical insight. It was an act of profound desperation and profound generosity. 5 weeks later, German panzers rolled across the Polish border. Within a month, Poland ceased to exist as an independent nation. But the gift survived. The third betrayal was the Germans' own. They believed that changing the daily key settings, the rotor positions and plugboard connections, was sufficient security. They believed their operators would follow procedures perfectly. They believed that mathematical complexity alone guaranteed secrecy. These beliefs were their downfall. Humans are creatures of habit. Even German radio operators trained in absolute discipline. They reused phrases. They signed messages with predictable signatures. They transmitted weather reports in standardized formats. And most critically, they believed in the machine so completely that they stopped questioning whether their enemy might be listening. The British government funneled the Polish intelligence to Bletchley Park, a requisitioned mansion that became the unlikely center of Britain's secret war. The estate filled with an eclectic collection of genius, mathematicians from Cambridge and Oxford, chess champions, linguists fluent in obscure dialects, crossword puzzle experts recruited through newspaper advertisements. They worked in wooden huts heated by coal stoves, their breath visible in winter, their clothes reeking of cigarette smoke and nervous sweat. Security was absolute. The work was grinding. The pressure was suffocating. Alan Turing, the mathematician who would later be recognized as one of the founding fathers of computer science, led the assault on naval Enigma. Where the Germans saw an unbreakable encryption machine, Turing saw a mechanical process that could be attacked by another mechanical process. He designed an improved version of the Polish bomby, which the British called simply the bomb. The machine was a marvel of electromechanical engineering. 6 feet tall, 7 feet long, 2 feet deep, containing 36 rotating drums, each drum simulating an Enigma rotor. It clicked and clattered through thousands of possible rotor positions per minute, searching for contradictions in the encrypted text that would reveal the daily key. But the bomb needed a starting point, a foothold in the mathematical darkness. The codebreakers called these footholds cribs. Sections of plain text they could guess appeared in the encrypted message. German naval communications provided many such opportunities. Weather reports followed standard formats. Convoy messages began with predictable phrases. And human nature, that eternal enemy of security, ensured that operators occasionally became sloppy. One U-boat commander habitually ended his messages with Heil Hitler. Another began every morning report with the same phrasing. These small human inconsistencies became wedges that Turing and his team hammered into Enigma's mathematical fortress. The first major breakthrough came in May 1941, when HMS Bulldog captured U-110, the same submarine from which Funkmeister Georg had transmitted his confident messages 2 months earlier. British sailors, boarding the damaged submarine before it sank, found an Enigma machine, codebooks, and crucially, the current key settings. This intelligence windfall, combined with the mathematical machinery at Bletchley Park, opened a window into German naval communications that would remain open with varying degrees of clarity for the rest of the war. The Germans never knew. This fact is perhaps more remarkable than the code breaking itself. British intelligence, under the designation Ultra, guarded the secret with fanatical discipline. They allowed convoys to be attacked rather than reveal that they were reading German messages. They invented fictitious reconnaissance flights to explain how they knew U-boat positions. They sacrificed pawns to protect the king. When they did act on ultra-intelligence, they did so with such careful misdirection that German cryptographers, investigating whether Enigma had been compromised, concluded again and again that the machine remained secure. Meanwhile, the shadow war intensified. By mid-1942, Bletchley Park employed over 7,000 people. The bombs multiplied. Eventually more than 200 machines working in synchronized rotation, their bronze drums spinning through possibility space at mechanical velocity. The work continued 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Shifts changed, but the machines never stopped. In Hut 8, Turing's domain, mathematicians decoded naval Enigma. In Hut 6, they attacked Luftwaffe and Wehrmacht traffic. The intelligence flowed outward through secure channels to commanders who often did not know its source, only that it was reliable and must be protected at any cost. Across the Atlantic, American cryptographers, while not the primary breakers of Enigma, contributed crucial support to the Allied effort and waged their own spectacular campaign against Japanese codes. The United States Army's Signal Intelligence Service and the Navy's OP-20G brought industrial scale and different mathematical approaches to cipher work. When America entered the war in December 1941, cryptographic cooperation between Britain and the United States deepened. American factories began producing bombs based on British designs. American personnel trained at Bletchley Park. American mathematicians contributed innovations in statistical analysis and machine design. The National Cash Register Company in Dayton, Ohio, became an unlikely fortress of code-breaking, manufacturing bombs with the precision of bank machinery and the secrecy of atomic research. The Americans also achieved triumphs in the Pacific that mirrored and in some ways exceeded the British success against Enigma. Japanese naval codes, particularly the JN-25 cipher, used for operational communications, fell to American cryptanalysis. The intelligence gained from broken Japanese codes enabled the decisive American victory at Midway in June 1942, a battle that turned the tide of the Pacific War. The Americans demonstrated that industrial democracy, often dismissed by Axis powers as soft and undisciplined, could mobilize intellectual resources and technological innovation with devastating effectiveness. But it was against Enigma in the Atlantic and European theaters where the full impact of Allied code-breaking became most apparent. The Battle of the Atlantic, the prolonged struggle between German U-boats and Allied convoys that Churchill called the only thing that ever frightened me during the war, swung on the fulcrum of intelligence. When Bletchley Park read Enigma efficiently, convoy losses plummeted. When temporary changes to German procedures blinded the codebreakers, as happened in early 1942 when the Germans introduced a 4-rotor Enigma for Atlantic U-boats, merchant ship sinkings soared. The graph of Allied shipping losses tracked, with uncanny precision, the graph of Bletchley Park's success rate against naval Enigma. The numbers tell the story with brutal clarity. In November 1942, as Bletchley Park regained consistent access to 4-rotor naval Enigma, U-boats sank 119 ships, totaling 729,000 tons. By May 1943, with ultra-intelligence flowing freely, U-boat effectiveness collapsed. That month, Admiral Dönitz lost 41 U-boats, more than 12% of his entire operational fleet, while sinking only 50 Allied merchant ships. The ratio had reversed catastrophically. Dönitz, mystified and desperate, withdrew his submarines from the North Atlantic. He never understood why. German intelligence exhaustively investigated whether Enigma had been compromised. They examined captured British ships for radio direction-finding equipment. They analyzed patterns in Allied convoy routing. They tested their machines and procedures. Every investigation concluded that Enigma remained secure. The mathematics said it was impossible to break. Therefore, it was unbroken. This German confidence in mathematical impossibility, maintained even in the face of mounting evidence that the Allies possessed inexplicable intelligence advantages, reveals something profound about the nature of technological faith. The Germans had built a machine that embodied mathematical certainty, and they could not conceive that human ingenuity, combined with industrial resources and mechanical computation, could overcome that certainty. They were victims of their own sophistication. Their engineers and mathematicians, brilliant as they were, imagined a war of machines against humans. They did not imagine machines against machines, guided by human insight. The symbolic object of this hidden war was not a weapon or a flag, but something more abstract. The radio wave itself, that invisible courier of electromagnetic energy that carried messages at the speed of light across continents and oceans. German commanders sent their secrets riding on radio waves, confident that mathematical encryption wrapped each message in impenetrable armor. But those same waves, democratic and indiscriminate, radiated outward in all directions. British and American listening stations caught them from the air like butterflies in a net. The waves traveled to Bletchley Park, to Arlington Hall in Virginia, to listening posts in India and Australia and Gibraltar. Democracy, it turned out, had an appetite for signals intelligence that totalitarianism could not match. The open societies mobilized thousands of minds and industrial resources with a flexibility that rigid hierarchies could not replicate. There was also irony in the diversity of the Allied code-breaking effort. At Bletchley Park, women constituted more than 70% of the workforce. They operated the bombs, analyzed decrypts, managed logistics, and made crucial insights that male mathematicians might have missed. Joan Clark, a Cambridge mathematician who worked alongside Turing in Hut 8, made significant contributions to breaking naval Enigma. Yet she was paid less than her male colleagues, barred from official recognition during the war and omitted from initial post-war histories. The Germans, confident in their Aryan superiority and rigid hierarchies, were being systematically defeated by an Allied effort that included women, Jews, colonial subjects, and anyone else who could contribute regardless of background. The democracy they despised proved more efficient at waging total war than their own carefully ordered racial state. As 1943 turned to 1944, ultra-intelligence became the invisible hand guiding Allied strategy. The invasion of Normandy in June 1944 succeeded in part because Bletchley Park read German communications about troop dispositions, supply situations, and strategic expectations. The Allies knew that Hitler believed the invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais and maintained that belief even after the landings in Normandy. They knew because they read his messages to his commanders. They read the frantic communications as German generals tried to respond to the invasion, while Hitler, convinced it was a feint, withheld critical armored reserves. Every day, streams of decrypted intelligence flowed from Bletchley Park to Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Eisenhower called ultra-intelligence decisive to Allied victory. The Germans fought on, their communications still encrypted by machines they trusted absolutely, never knowing that their enemies read their mail with increasing ease. German radio operators, even as the Reich collapsed around them, continued turning Enigma rotors, continued sending messages through mathematical transformations they believed inviolate. In the final months of the war, as Germany fragmented into isolated pockets, Enigma traffic actually increased. Commanders, cut off from telephone and courier networks, relied more heavily on radio. They encrypted everything, confident in their security, and the Allies read everything, watching the death throes of the Third Reich in real time through the window of broken ciphers. When the war ended in May 1945, the secret remained locked. Churchill ordered that the existence of Ultra be buried. The bombs were destroyed or hidden. Documents were classified. The thousands who had worked at Bletchley Park returned to civilian life, sworn to silence, unable to tell even their families what they had done during the war. Alan Turing went back to theoretical mathematics and pioneering computer science, his war service unacknowledged. The Polish mathematicians who had begun it all, now living under Soviet occupation or in exile, could not speak of their achievements. The world heard stories of Spitfire pilots and Sherman tanks, of D-Day beaches and B-17 bombers, but nothing of the quiet men and women who had broken the unbreakable code. The secret held for 29 years. Not until 1974, when the British government began selective declassification of ultra material, did the world learn the full story. By then, most of the German commanders who had trusted Enigma were dead. They died, never knowing that their perfect machine had betrayed them, that their secrets had been read, that the mathematical certainty they relied upon was an illusion shattered by human brilliance and mechanical persistence. The revelation, when it came, reframed understanding of the entire war. Historians recalculated. The Battle of the Atlantic, once attributed primarily to superior technology and convoy tactics, was understood as an intelligence victory. The success of D-Day, attributed to superior planning and force concentration, was recognized as equally dependent on knowing German dispositions and intentions. Even the general timeline of the war, the question of why it ended in 1945 rather than dragging into 1946 or beyond, had to be reconsidered in light of the intelligence advantage that Ultra provided. The mathematical achievement itself stands as one of the monuments of 20th century intellectual history. The breaking of Enigma required innovations in logic, probability theory, statistical analysis, and mechanical computation that anticipated the digital age by decades. The bombs were not computers in the modern sense. They were special-purpose electromechanical calculators, but they embodied computational thinking. Turing's work on Enigma directly influenced his subsequent development of theoretical computer science. The culture of Bletchley Park, with its emphasis on interdisciplinary collaboration, parallel processing of problems, and rapid iteration of solutions, presaged the research culture of later computer science and artificial intelligence laboratories. There is also a deeper lesson about the nature of secrecy and security. The Germans built their faith on mathematical complexity alone. They believed that if the numbers were large enough, if the combinations were sufficiently astronomical, then security was guaranteed. They were wrong, not because the mathematics was flawed, but because they failed to account for human insight, industrial resources, and the power of organized intelligence efforts to attack seemingly impossible problems systematically. Security, it turned out, required more than mathematical complexity. It required understanding that your enemy might be smarter, more persistent, and better resourced than you imagined. It required assuming that your clever solution might not be clever enough. The Enigma story also illuminates the difference between mechanical and human intelligence. The machine performed its calculations flawlessly. It encrypted exactly as designed, but machines do not understand context. They do not recognize that a weather report at 6 every morning is predictable, that a U-boat commander's habit of ending messages with Heil Hitler is a weakness, that standardized formats create patterns. Humans saw these patterns. Humans exploited them. The unbreakable machine was broken not by another machine alone, but by machines guided by human insight, working in collaboration, each amplifying the other's strengths. In the end, the radio waves that carried German secrets across the Atlantic and European skies became a metaphor for the war itself. The Germans sent their messages confidently, wrapped in mathematical certainty, believing themselves secure in isolation. But waves radiate outward, indiscriminate and unstoppable. They carry their information to anyone with ears to hear. The Allies built the listening posts, the analysis machinery, the intellectual frameworks to capture those waves and extract their secrets. They did so not through superior racial destiny or authoritarian efficiency, but through mobilizing democratic resources, welcoming diverse talent, and creating systems that rewarded innovation regardless of its source. The irony is almost poetic. Germany, the nation that prided itself on scientific precision, engineering excellence, and mathematical rigor, was defeated in part by those very qualities turned against it. The British and Americans did not break Enigma through lucky guessing or brute force. They broke it through mathematics more sophisticated than the mathematics that created it, through engineering more ambitious than the engineering of the machine itself, through systematic organization of intellectual resources that totalitarianism could not match. Today, the handful of surviving Enigma machines sit in museums, mute artifacts of a secret that was kept too well for too long. Visitors examine the brass rotors, the wooden case, the simple keyboard. They are told the numbers, 158 quintillion possible settings. They are shown the plug board, the lamp board, the mechanical elegance of the design. What they cannot see, what no museum display can fully capture, is the hubris that those machines represented, the absolute faith in technological solution, the confidence that mathematics alone could guarantee security against human determination. The story of Enigma is not merely a tale of code breaking or secret intelligence. It is a story about the limits of technological certainty, about the power of human ingenuity to overcome seemingly impossible odds, about the ways that open societies can mobilize intellectual resources that closed societies cannot match. It is a story about the invisible wars that rage beneath the surface of visible conflicts, about victories that cannot be celebrated, because celebration would destroy the very advantage that made victory possible. Most of all, it is a story about the dangerous seduction of believing in the unbreakable. The Germans believed in their machine so completely that they stopped questioning, stopped innovating, stopped imagining that they might be wrong. They encrypted their secrets with mathematical perfection and sent them flying through the air on electromagnetic wings, never imagining that their enemies had built nets to catch those wings, machines to break that perfection, minds brilliant enough to see through the mathematical fog. The radio waves still travel at the speed of light, carrying voices and data across continents and oceans. The machines have evolved beyond recognition. Enigma's mechanical rotors replaced by silicon chips, executing algorithms billions of times per second. But the fundamental truth remains unchanged. No code is unbreakable. No secret is absolutely secure, and the greatest vulnerability in any system of security is the human assumption that the system cannot be defeated. The Germans thought their Enigma code was unbreakable until Allied cryptographers read every message. The war they thought they were fighting in secrecy was being watched, analyzed, and countered by minds they had underestimated and resources they had dismissed. In the end, the unbreakable code broke not because the mathematics failed, but because human brilliance, given purpose and resources, could overcome any mathematical barrier that human beings had erected. That truth, forged in the secret war against Enigma, echoes across the decades. In an age where security depends increasingly on mathematical complexity, on encryption algorithms, and computational barriers, the lesson of Bletchley Park remains urgent. Technological certainty is an illusion. Human ingenuity is boundless, and the society that mobilizes its intellectual resources most effectively, that welcomes contribution from every possible source, that questions its own assumptions and attacks its own systems to find their weaknesses, that society possesses an advantage that no mathematical formula can overcome. The unbreakable code was broken, and in its breaking, the course of history turned.